You know those moments when everything around you is perfectly quiet? Maybe you're sitting in class, at work, on a bus, or worse, across from someone you're trying to impress, and out of nowhere your stomach decides to perform its own concert, growling, bubbling, gurgling, making noises so loud you're convinced the entire room heard it, and instantly your face heats up with embarrassment because in your mind it sounds like thunder echoing inside your body. I've been there more times than I care to admit. And every single time I wondered why this keeps happening, especially right after eating when I should be full and satisfied, not noisy and awkward. And that curiosity led me down a rabbit hole where I discovered that what we casually call stomach noises are not only normal but deeply fascinating because they reveal how alive and active our bodies really are. Yet at the same time, they can hint at habits we don't realize are messing with our digestion. So today I want to tell you my story, not in pieces, not in cold scientific terms, but as a raw flow of experience mixed with discovery. Because I know if you've ever had your stomach embarrass you at the wrong time, you've asked yourself the same thing. Why is my stomach making noises after eating? And is there something wrong with me? And to answer that, we need to walk through the journey together. From those awkward public moments to the hidden science that explains every growl, let's rewind to one of the first times I noticed it seriously. I had just finished a huge family dinner, plates stacked with rice, curry, fried snacks, desserts, soda on the side. The kind of meal that makes you lean back and sigh with satisfaction. But within half an hour, as we all sat in the living room chatting, my belly began to sound like it was hosting a storm. Gurgles so loud my cousin laughed and said, "Wow, you must still be hungry." And I smiled to cover my confusion. But inside I was thinking, I just ate more than enough. How can this be hunger? That moment stuck with me because it showed me how misunderstood these noises are. People assume it's just hunger, but in reality it's the sound of digestion in action. Doctors even have a funny word for it, borborygmi, the technical term for those growls and rumbles. And while the word sounds like something out of a cartoon, it's simply the vibration of gas and liquid as they're moved along your intestines by muscular contractions called peristalsis. In other words, your gut is like a conveyor belt, always moving, always churning. And when food, gas, and fluids shift around, they create echoes. And when the meal is heavy or messy, the sound becomes a symphony. I didn't know that back then, though. All I knew was my stomach had embarrassed me. So I started paying attention and noticed patterns. Meals with soda or fried foods made the noise worse, while lighter meals seemed calmer. That got me curious enough to do some research, and suddenly a whole new world opened up. Foods that produce gas like beans, cabbage, onions, broccoli, lentils, carbonated drinks, even chewing gum, all contribute to louder noises because they either introduce more air or create more fermentation in the gut. And when your intestines go to work, that gas gets pushed and shuffled around, making those gurgling sounds. So what felt like betrayal was really just biology. And once I realized that I couldn't stop noticing how every choice I made at the table echoed later as sound in my belly, and it didn't stop with food, because sometimes the noises came with cramps, bloating, or discomfort. And that's when I began to worry. Maybe this wasn't just normal digestion. Maybe it was intolerance, or something serious like IBS, lactose issues, or even infection, and that thought made me more anxious, which ironically made the noises worse, because stress itself is a powerful trigger for the gut, and that's when I stumbled onto something that changed everything. The gut and brain are connected more deeply than most people realize through what's called the vagus nerve, a two-way communication highway, which means when you're stressed, your gut reacts, and when your gut is upset, your brain feels it too. No wonder before exams or presentations or big dates my stomach would act up louder than ever. It wasn't random. It was my body echoing my nerves, and suddenly everything clicked. My stomach wasn't my enemy. It was my messenger, trying to tell me when I was stressed, when I was overeating, or when I was eating the wrong combinations. But back then, I was too busy being embarrassed to listen, so I kept ignoring it until one unforgettable morning when I had an important job interview. I thought eating a big breakfast would fuel me, so I stuffed myself with toast, eggs, milk, and coffee, then sat in the waiting room in my best suit, feeling confident until the room went silent, and my stomach erupted like a drum roll announcing my arrival. Heads turned. I pretended to cough, shifted in my chair, even tried holding my breath like that would help, but the noises kept rolling in waves until finally my name was called. And walking into that interview, I couldn't think about anything else except what if it happens again. Thankfully it didn't, but the damage was done in my mind. I walked out knowing I had to figure this thing out once and for all, because clearly it wasn't just funny anymore, it was affecting my confidence. So I made it a mission to test different habits, eating slower to avoid swallowing air, drinking more water to help digestion, cutting back on soda, and writing down which meals triggered the loudest sounds. Slowly patterns formed, and I realized junk food late at night, dairy without lactase, and greasy fried meals were top culprits, while lighter meals, soup,
soups, salads, fruits, and lean proteins kept things calmer. It was like tuning an instrument, and with every change my stomach started cooperating more. But here's where it gets funny. Sometimes even when I did everything right, the noises still came, and that confused me until I learned that stomach sounds are actually a sign of a healthy, active gut. Doctors say a silent gut can be a bad thing because it might indicate slowed digestion or even obstruction. So ironically, the very sounds I was running from were proof my digestive system was alive and working hard. That shifted my whole perspective. Instead of fighting the noises, I started to respect them, even laugh at them. Because what's the point of hiding something every human experiences? And once I relaxed, the embarrassment faded. And the more I shared this story with friends, the more they admitted they had their own embarrassing growl moments too. One said his stomach always growled in church, another during long exams, another while sitting next to his crush, and we laughed because suddenly it felt universal, not shameful, and that realization was liberating. It meant I wasn't alone, and neither are you. If your stomach makes noises after eating, you're part of the most human club there is, a club of living, breathing, digesting people whose bodies are just doing their thing, even if the timing feels cruel, but deep down it's proof that your body is alive and busy keeping you running. The more I leaned into this idea, the more I realized my stomach was like a teacher whispering lessons I had been too embarrassed to hear, and every rumble carried a story, whether it was about what I ate, how fast I ate it, how stressed I was, or even how my gut bacteria were behaving that day. And yes, the bacteria inside you matter more than you think, because the trillions of microbes that live in your intestines are not silent guests. They are active workers breaking down fibers, fermenting foods, producing gases, and when they are balanced, they help keep things smooth. But when they are off balance, maybe because of antibiotics, bad diet, or lack of diversity in food, they can go into overdrive, and the result is more gas, more bubbling, and yes, louder noises. And when I first learned that, my mind was blown because it meant that some of the gurgling I blamed on myself wasn't even mine. It was the byproduct of tiny invisible roommates inside me. So naturally I experimented, adding probiotics, yogurt, kefir, fermented foods, and I noticed something amazing. The chaos softened, not completely, but enough to notice the difference. It was like my gut orchestra had shifted from a wild jam session to a more controlled symphony, and that showed me just how alive this system really is. But still, I had questions because sometimes my stomach would be calm all day and then explode with noise at night. Sometimes I would eat something light and still hear gurgling, and sometimes I wouldn't eat at all, and yet my belly would roar in protest. And that's when I discovered another twist. Your stomach can make noises even when it's empty, because those same peristaltic contractions that move food also sweep through when there's no food left, cleaning the intestines like a janitor. And that process, called the migrating motor complex, creates sounds too. So the famous growl associated with hunger is actually your body's housekeeping cycle, clearing out leftovers and making space for the next meal. And suddenly it all made sense. Why even after eating, the cycle could kick in hours later and make me sound hungry when I wasn't. It wasn't a cry for food, it was maintenance. And I laughed, thinking how wrong we've been interpreting our body's signals for so long, calling them hunger pangs when they were really self-cleaning programs. And that brought me a strange kind of peace, because it meant noise wasn't a problem. Noise was normal, yet the world had trained me to feel embarrassed by it, and I remembered countless times on dates or in meetings or silent rooms where the fear of a growl distracted me more than the actual sound, and I wondered how many people live in that same quiet anxiety, waiting for their own body to betray them. And it struck me that the only betrayal is our lack of understanding, because once you know the truth, the shame evaporates. I'll never forget another story. I was traveling on a long bus ride surrounded by strangers, and I had packed snacks, chips, soda, candy, the works. About halfway through the ride, as the driver turned the volume down and the bus grew quiet, my stomach decided to turn up its volume. It bubbled, gurgled, echoed through my seat, until even the man next to me gave a side glance, and I sat there pretending to sleep, while my insides were basically narrating a horror story. And yet, looking back, I realized the blame wasn't on my body. It was on the choices I made. All that junk food in a cramped position, with no water to help digest. Of course my gut had to struggle. Of course the noises came. So when I finally admitted that to myself, I felt less like a victim and more like a participant in the process. Because if I feed my body chaos, I can't expect silence in return. And that thought became
a guiding principle. Treat your gut kindly, and it will speak kindly. Treat it badly, and it will shout. And that shift changed not only how I ate, but how I viewed health overall, because digestion isn't separate from the rest of life. It's connected to sleep, stress, emotions, even posture. Yes, posture, because sitting slouched after eating compresses your abdomen, making digestion harder and noisier, while sitting upright or walking gently after meals can actually help things move more smoothly. I tested it myself after heavy dinners. Instead of collapsing onto the couch, I took short walks, and I was stunned to notice how much calmer my stomach felt later. It was as if my body was thanking me for giving it space to work, and that small lifestyle shift, combined with food awareness, transformed my relationship with digestion. But of course, not every story has a neat fix. Sometimes, despite all precautions, the noises come anyway. Like one time I had a presentation in front of an audience, maybe 50 people, staring at me, and as I clicked to the second slide, a low rumble erupted into the microphone because the mic was clipped to my shirt right near my torso, and there was no covering it. Everyone heard it. I froze for a split second, then laughed it off, saying, "I guess my stomach wants to join the conversation." And to my surprise, the audience laughed with me, not at me. And that moment taught me the biggest lesson of all: embarrassment only lives in silence. Once you put light on it, it loses power and people relate, instead of ridicule, because everyone has been there. And that realization freed me from years of unnecessary shame. I no longer feared the noises, I embraced them as part of my human story. And once I did that, something magical happened. They bothered me less, and even seemed to happen less often, because I wasn't hyper-focused on them anymore. And I realized anxiety amplifies everything, even the volume of your stomach, and when you relax, your body follows. And in that way, digestion is not just about food, it's about mindset too. But still, my curiosity wanted to know more. So I kept digging into research, and found out about conditions where noises might be warning signs. Like if they come with sharp pain, bloating, diarrhea, or blood, then it's worth checking with a doctor, because sometimes it can be intolerance, IBS infections, or rarely more serious conditions. And knowing that balance helped me not to dismiss everything as normal, but not to panic at every growl either. Awareness without fear, that became my motto. And the more I practiced it, the more comfortable I became in my own skin. Because what used to be the most embarrassing sound in the world became background music to a healthy life. And maybe that's the gift in all of this: learning to listen without shame, to treat our bodies with respect, and to laugh at the awkwardness along the way. Because if there's one thing guaranteed in life, it's that your stomach will make noise at the wrong time. And instead of fearing it, you might as well accept it, celebrate it, and move on. The funny thing about living with a noisy stomach is that once you stop being embarrassed and start being curious, you begin to notice all the little connections you missed before, like how certain meals at certain times create completely different reactions. I noticed that when I ate late at night right before bed, my stomach was way louder than during the day. And at first I thought maybe it was coincidence, but then I realized digestion slows down when you lie flat and your body is trying to rest, not churn through food. So of course the process becomes messier and noisier, and it was almost like my gut was protesting, saying, "Why would you dump a feast into me, right when I'm ready to shut down?" And once I understood that, I started eating dinner earlier and lighter, and the difference was huge. My nights were calmer, and my mornings felt cleaner, and it reminded me that timing matters as much as the food itself. Then there was the discovery of chewing, something so simple yet so overlooked, because I used to eat fast, always rushing, always distracted, barely chewing, and every time I swallowed those big bites, I also swallowed a lot of air, and later that air would be trapped inside me, bouncing around like bubbles in a soda can, creating echoes that turned into gurgles. And the solution was so simple: just slow down, chew properly, give your saliva time to start breaking things down, and suddenly the orchestra inside gets softer. And it amazed me how such a tiny habit could change such a big issue, and yet most of us ignore it, because we live in a world where speed is celebrated. Eat fast, work fast, live fast, and then wonder why our bodies make so much noise. But our bodies were designed for rhythm, not rush. And once you sync with that rhythm, everything feels easier. I also learned about hydration, how drinking enough water throughout the day keeps digestion smooth and quiet, because water helps break. But when I skipped water, or drank only soda or coffee, my gut had to work harder. The movements were rougher, the gas was trapped more easily, and the noises were louder. And again, the fix was simple: keep a bottle of water nearby, sip often, and suddenly the belly choir calms down. And I couldn't believe how many of these answers were small daily choices, not big complicated solutions. And that realization gave me power, because it meant I wasn't helpless in the face of my noisy stomach. I was part of this equation, shaping it every day. But let me tell you something even more interesting. I started journaling my food and mood to track the connection, and what I discovered was incredible. Some of the loudest days weren't linked to food at all, but to emotions. When I was stressed, anxious, or nervous, my gut was noisier than when I was calm and relaxed, even if I ate the same thing. And that's when the whole gut-brain connection hit me harder than ever. Stress literally changes the rhythm of digestion, speeds it up or slows it down, unpredictably. And that irregular rhythm creates turbulence inside turbulence. You can hear and feel.
So those growls before a big meeting or those bubbles before a date aren't just digestion, they're stress signals. And once I saw it that way, I realized my gut was my emotional mirror reflecting back what I was feeling, even before I admitted it to myself. And that gave me a strange respect for it, because it wasn't betraying me, it was warning me, showing me, hey, you're nervous, calm down, breathe, and maybe then I can calm down too. And once I practiced breathing techniques, meditation, simple relaxation before meals, the difference was astonishing. Not only was my stomach quieter, but my whole body felt lighter and calmer, and that showed me how deeply our health is tied together. You can't separate mind from body. They dance together always, and sometimes the loudest proof of that dance is the noise in your belly. And I'll never forget one particular evening when this became crystal clear. I had been preparing a speech for weeks, and the night before the big day, I sat rehearsing over and over, obsessing about every word, and sure enough, my stomach was louder than ever, bubbling constantly, and I panicked, thinking, what if this happens tomorrow on stage? But instead of spiraling, I tried something new. I stopped rehearsing, I closed my eyes, I breathed deeply in and out, focusing on calmness, and within minutes the noises softened like waves settling after a storm. And that moment was so powerful because it proved to me that peace on the inside creates peace in the gut, and the more I tested it, the truer it became. And I thought, how many of us could transform our digestion, not just by changing food, but by changing thought, by changing pace, by changing how we treat ourselves every day. And that idea stuck with me every time I felt nervous after eating. I reminded myself, breathe, relax, don't feed the panic, because panic is louder than hunger. And once I started living by that, I not only managed my noisy stomach, I managed my life better. But of course it wasn't always perfect. There were slip-ups, like one day I went to the movies, armed with popcorn, soda, and candy, and halfway through the film, in the dead quiet of a suspense scene, my stomach made the loudest growl I've ever heard. Heads turned, people giggled, and I sank into my seat, embarrassed, but also amused, because I knew exactly why it happened. Too much soda, too much sugar, too much sitting still. It was like the perfect storm, and instead of blaming my body, I just smiled, thinking, well, I asked for this. And in that way, even the embarrassing moments became lighter, because when you know the cause, you don't feel cursed, you feel responsible. And that's a big shift, because responsibility gives you control, shame gives you nothing. So over time, my whole relationship with digestion changed. What began as a battle became a partnership. What began as embarrassment became awareness, and what began as frustration became gratitude, because without those sounds, I would never have learned so much about my own health, about how food, timing, mood, and habits all weave together to create the soundtrack of my belly. And I started sharing this openly with others, and to my surprise, people leaned in, curious, relieved, excited to know they weren't alone. Some laughed, telling their own stories of rumbling bellies in libraries or exams. Others confessed they thought something was wrong with them, and hearing my journey calmed their fears. And that showed me how powerful it is to break silence around something everyone experiences but nobody talks about loudly. And the more I told the story, the more I realized maybe that's the gift of embarrassment. It forces us to look deeper and to connect with others, because nothing bonds people faster than saying, hey, my stomach betrayed me in public, and someone else saying, oh, mine did too, and suddenly you're laughing instead of hiding. And that laughter itself is healing, because laughter relaxes the body, relaxes the gut, and what once was shame becomes medicine. And maybe that's the real cure for a noisy stomach: acceptance, humor, awareness, not fear. Because when you embrace it, you realize it was never your enemy. It was always your body doing its best to keep you alive and working hard. The real breakthrough came when I stopped thinking of my stomach as a problem to fix, and started thinking of it as a friend with a voice. And like every friend, sometimes it speaks too loudly, sometimes it mumbles, sometimes it interrupts, but it always has something important to say. And once I began listening, I noticed patterns I had missed for years, like how dairy made it louder than usual, or how fried foods created long echoing sounds that didn't stop for hours, and how fiber, though healthy, sometimes produced its own symphony when I overdid it. And each discovery made me realize that my gut was teaching me about balance, and it wasn't saying never eat this or never enjoy that. It was saying notice how I respond, learn the rhythm, learn the signals, and then you'll know how to live in harmony with me. And that perspective changed everything, because instead of fearing the growl, I welcomed it as feedback, real-time feedback, more honest than any app or gadget, because no technology can match the raw truth of your own body. And I started treating those noises like notifications, a kind of natural alert system, telling me slow down, hydrate, change posture, relax your mind, or maybe avoid that extra plate of fries. And when I followed the alert, the reward was immediate. The noises softened, Digestion flowed, energy improved, and my whole body thanked me in silence, or at least in quieter background, hums that felt almost comforting, like the engine of a car running smoothly, instead of rattling. And when I told a friend this idea of treating the stomach as a friend, he laughed, but then he tried it, and later admitted it worked for him too, because the moment you stop fighting your body and start partnering with it, the stress dissolves and the healing begins. And that truth applies not just to digestion, but to everything in health. Your body is never against you. It's always speaking. The question is, do you listen or do you dismiss? And when you dismiss, it screams louder. When you listen, it whispers softly. And that realization gave me a whole new respect for self-care, not as luxury, but as survival. Because ignoring yourself always costs more in the long run. And I wanted to share this because too many people live in silent battles with their gut, ashamed of sounds, embarrassed at the table, or in meetings blaming themselves or thinking they're broken when really they're just human. And humans are noisy creatures inside and out. We laugh, we cry, we breathe, we beat with hearts and pump with lungs and churn with stomachs. Why should we expect silence when life itself is rhythm and motion? And once you accept that, even the awkward moments become lighter, like the time I was sitting in a job interview trying to stay composed while my belly was performing a concert. And instead of panicking, I smiled and made a little joke about being hungrier for the opportunity than I expected. And the interviewer laughed, the tension broke, and the whole meeting went better because I leaned into honesty instead of hiding. And it reminded me that often the thing we think will ruin us actually connects us, because vulnerability is relatable. Everyone has a belly. Everyone has heard it sing, so why hide what unites us? And in that sense, stomach noises are not flaws, they're reminders of our shared humanity. Because no matter how polished someone looks, no matter how powerful or rich they are, their stomach still rumbles, their body still speaks, and that makes us equal. And maybe that's why telling this story matters. Because it's not just about digestion, it's about embracing the parts of life that seem embarrassing but are actually universal. And when we stop being ashamed of them, we gain freedom. Freedom to laugh, freedom to connect, freedom to live without fear of every little sound inside us. And that freedom is priceless because it means you can sit at a dinner table, eat your favorite meal, and if your stomach decides to join the conversation, you don't sink in shame. You smile and carry on knowing it's natural and temporary and not a reflection of your worth. And when I reached that point, I realized my journey with stomach noises had become a metaphor for life itself, because how often do we hide parts of ourselves thinking they're unacceptable, only to discover they're the most common and human things of all, and by embracing them we become stronger and more at peace. And I think back to my younger self, sitting in silence, mortified by those growls, wishing they would stop, and I want to tell that version of me, relax, breathe, laugh, it's okay, you're okay, and nothing is wrong with you. And I want to tell anyone listening the same. Your body is not broken, your stomach is not your enemy. Those noises are just signs of life and digestion, and maybe even reminders to slow down, to listen to yourself, to care for yourself. And when you shift from fear to curiosity, from shame to humor, from battle to partnership, you will see what I saw, that peace is possible even inside your own belly. And once you learn that, you start to notice the quiet victories every day, like the first time you eat mindfully and hear only a gentle hum instead of chaos, or the first time you get through a meeting without worrying about your stomach, because you know you have strategies and confidence, or the first time you laugh openly when it happens, because you no longer see it as failure, but as part of your unique soundtrack. And those victories build into freedom, and soon the noises no longer control you because you've reclaimed control through understanding, through awareness, through compassion. And that transformation is the real story here, not just of digestion, but of self-discovery, because sometimes
The path to peace in life begins with the simple act of listening to the growls inside you and honoring what they're trying to say. And the more you honor them, the more you discover about yourself. And that journey never ends, because our bodies keep changing, our guts keep evolving, and with every phase of life, new lessons appear. But instead of fearing them, I now welcome them, because I know each sound is a message, and each message is a chance to learn and grow and live more fully. In the end, I understood that the noises I once hated were never my enemy. They were signals my body used to remind me to slow down, chew better, drink more water, breathe deeper, and release stress. And when I started listening instead of hiding, the shame faded, the sound softened, and I felt lighter. Even in public moments when my belly growled, I no longer felt embarrassed. I felt human, because everyone has a body that rumbles. It's not a flaw, it's life itself moving inside us. So the next time your stomach makes noise after eating, don't panic, just smile and remember that sound means your body is alive, working for you and keeping you going. And that is something to respect, not to fear.